of the year versus end of the year, beginning of the month versus end of the month, okay? And I will tell you right now, 90+% of all of the calculations and transactions that you will do, the assumption is everything happens at the end of the year, end of the month, okay? Now, this will become important later. Right now, just park that in the back of your mind, okay? All right, so for this problem, like I said, I'm spending a little bit more time on this than I am on, obviously, some of the problems going forward, but I want to make sure that some of the key things are starting to infiltrate your brain the way that you're thinking about this. So, this guy is basically writing a check today, time zero, $24,166.14, and then 1 year from now, he receives $5,000, another following year, $5,000, so forth, so on, for the next 10 years, and the final payment is made at the end of the 10th year. And the assumption is this is going to give him a 16% rate of return. Is everybody cool with that? Yes or no? Now, using logic, not the calculator, if I were to lower that interest rate from, let's say, 16% to 8%, what would happen to this number? Would it get bigger or smaller?
Smaller.
Well, I'm saying bigger, because your present value goes up, you're getting
Inversely
bigger.
proportional.
You're closing the gap.
You're closing the gap. So in other words, let's just do this. Put in, right after this, just put in 8%, resolve for present value.
I understood 18%.
If you've already cleared it out, that's okay, just put it in again.
That's divided by that?
You should get 33,550. Okay, at 8%. Everybody see that? Now, let's just go a little bit further. Let's go 2%. $44,913, roughly. So what are we doing? It's getting higher and higher. So, using your brain just for a second, to tell how many of you are really thinking about this, what if I make the rate of return 0? What's the dollar amount going to be? 50,000. Because he's not getting any return. He's just paying the flat out. So let's just do that. 0%. Present value. I'm not even going to punch it in the calculator because I know it's going to be 50,000. Okay? Make sense? Yeah. Okay. So if he doesn't demand any sort of a rate of return whatsoever, in other words, he just wants to get paid back what he originally invested, and he doesn't want any sort of rate of return, then he can spend as much as $50,000 because he's going to get the full 50, but it's going to take him 10 years to get it paid back. But the point being is, who among us is willing to lend somebody $50,000 and get paid back over 50 years and not get any sort of rate of return off of it?
Taxpayers.
Under normal circumstances, yeah. But I mean, seriously, most of us are not going to be willing to lend somebody money and then obviously not earn some sort of rate of return off of that money over the time period we lend it to. Okay? All right, moving forward. Comfortable with that one? Yes? Okay. Trust me, they get harder. Okay. All right. All right, so let's take another one here. This is always kind of a simple, fun one. A7. The value of a house today is $98,000 if it has increased in value at 6% a year. What was the value 8 years ago? This one's, word-wise, is a little tricky. It's actually a simple problem, but word-wise, it's a little bit tricky. Because what seems like it's present value is really future value, because of the way they ask the question. Okay? So, first of all, before we do anything else, how many payments per year? Is it monthly or
One.
annual?
Annual.
Okay, it's annual. All right, so one payment per year. Again, clear everything out just to be safe. All right, 98,000. What does that number represent? So as I said, at first, value of a house today is 98,000. But if you read the rest of the question, you realize it's not the present value. That's actually the future value. Okay? This is where I said it can be a little bit tricky. And I'll explain it here in just a second. Okay? If it is increased at 6% a year, what does the 6% represent? Interest rate. Okay? And what was the value 8 years ago? 8, shift in. So what are we actually solving for? PV, present value. What was the value really 8 years ago? So it's kind of like, in one sense, historic value, but we don't have that as an option. Okay, so we got to kind of adjust our thinking here a little bit. All right? So, okay, so what you should get is 61,486.41. Okay, does everybody get that? All right, now let's explain this just a little bit. So this problem is saying, yeah, okay, we've got the value today, we know what the value today is, we know that the market has on average gone up by 6% a year for the last 8 years, so we simply want to kind of historically go back and think about what was the value then. Okay, and so that's all we're really doing, and we're saying that it was worth 61,486.41. Does that make sense? Yes? Okay. All right. Let's pick another one here. Let's do A12.
So we do this one,
Okay, A12. You're considering the purchase 75 acres of land that you believe will be developed as a shopping center. You estimate that you can sell the land 3 years from now, $25,000 per acre. How much should you pay now for the land if the required rate of return is 25%?
What those are you?
A12.
Thank you.
Okay, so once again, monthly or annual?
Annual.
Annual. Okay. So let's start off with the first piece of information that we've got. Now, this one, we can approach it a couple different ways. We can either do the price per acre or the overall price. Either way, you're going to get the same answer. Okay, so we're just going to go with the price per acre is fine. All right. So first of all, we're dealing with 3 years of time. It says how much is it going to be worth 3 years from now. So 3 years is the term, and 25,000. In this case, is saying that we can sell it 3 years from now at that price. So that is going to be future value. And the required rate of return is 25%, so that's going to be our interest rate. And it's simply saying, how much should you pay now? So that is our present value. Okay. So 12,800 an acre. So not a bad investment. 25% rate of return each year, not a bad deal. Okay? Comfortable with that? Yes? Now if you want to go ahead and say, okay, well, there's 75 acres, you could, sort of keep going. So 960,000 total. Now, just out of curiosity, this is something every single developer should know. How many square feet are an acre of land?
43,400.
560.
Yeah.
43,560 square feet per acre. I'll write that down, because you're gonna need that at some point. You least expect it.
500?
43,560 square feet in an acre of land. Okay? And one of the reasons that you need to kind of commit that to memory is because it's an unusual number, but it's something that whenever you see land that's for sale or you see property that has been subdivided, in most instances they refer to, even whenever it's in quirky, it almost always is referred to as acreage. And it's going to, it may be half an acre, a quarter of an acre, an eighth of an acre, whatever. Well, you need to be able to do that conversion, okay? So commit that to memory. All right, moving forward.
Great. Great.
Well, just so you know, we don't take breaks in my class. So if you need to use the restroom, whatever, you just go do it and come back. All right. Let's see. Question A21. All right. This one is our first what? Monthly. Okay. So in this case, 12 payments per year. All right. Now whenever you hit the shift clear all, what you should see in your display is 12p year. Okay? Because now if you read the problem, once again, question A21, is within the first sentence it says, suppose you deposit $2,000 at the end of each month. That's how you know it's monthly. Okay? You look for those key words. Okay? So once we've got that, then we start putting in the information. So $2,000 is the first number that they give you. Now it says you're depositing this. Okay? If you're the depositor, is this an inflow or an outflow to you? Outflow. Okay? You are writing a check to the bank for that amount. So we're going to make that a negative, and that is going to be a payment because it is occurring more than once. Okay? And the interest rate is 10%. And the term, 6%. I'm sorry, 6 years. Sorry. And we are solving for what?
Future value.
Future value. Okay.
2,431.
Okay.
196.
196.
Yeah, 196.
One more time, just double check. Okay. $196,222.63. Everybody get that?
No.
If you didn't get that,
Try to get.
you more than likely did not change the term or change the number of compounding periods from 1 to 12.
Or the sign, right?
Or the sign. But the sign's not going to make the difference in the case of this particular problem. It's really going to be whether or not you make sure that you put it in as monthly versus annual.
Yeah, it's around.
Okay. All right? You good so far? Okay.
It doesn't allow me to change the numbers
around.
What do you mean?
from 1 year to 12 payments. I'm doing
Yeah.
12.
No. No. Remember, it's under under the payments per year. Okay?
Alright, and then thank you for that email level, since you don't take breaks. Monday I have an interview.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, I got 1,500.
Yeah, I got 15,000.
You might have got to hit the second and.
Yeah, I hit the 12 shift.
You probably use the PG and not the
Okay.
No, for the 6 and.
Shift, you have to hit the 6, and then the shift, then the end. That's what I'm talking about, that you'll. No. Okay. All right, so what you're doing, so both of you can see. All right. So first thing, you're still set at 1 payment per year. So you need to do a 12 shift payments per year. Okay.
That's payment? PYR.
Well, no, that's what's underneath. That's what's underneath the. I pointed that out earlier. Okay, so 2,000 plus or minus payment, 10 interest rate, 6 shift in, future value.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mike, go get me a coffee.
What? All right. Okay.
All this was PYR, it's the same thing as PMT, so why would they answer the same?
Another similar one to one we sort of worked. Let's see if you can do this on your own. A25.
And the answers are coming correct.
Because before, they were
A25.
only 1 payment per year, so you didn't need to specify anything. Now that it's 12.
Okay, you've got 30 seconds to work it.
For instance,
Come on, let's go.
you do 12 times whatever. So instead of just 1 payment.
What number? 25?
A25.
Is the present value minus?
Yeah, because it's the payment now. Yeah.
You got 1967?
9, 13, 1.3.
Okay? All right. So, in this case, you bought the building for $1 million. That is going to be your
Present value?
present value.
Is it negative?
And you can make it negative if you want to, yes, because you did spend the money out of your pocket. Okay? The positives and the negatives under the simple problems aren't going to make any real difference. It's when we get to the more complex problems, they're going to make a difference, and so it is good to get in the habit of doing them precisely. Okay, interest rate is 7%, and then the term, 10 years, and we're solving for what is the
Future value.
future value. Okay, so we get
$5.
1,967,151.
So when he says PYR means present?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
you're right, man.
1967, 151.36. Okay, so let's just think about this one just for a second, because this is the sort of thing that every real estate developer, investor, they love to sort of think about this stuff in the sense that, okay, I bought a property for $1 million, you know, I own it for 10 years, I want to get a 7% rate of return on my holding period, how much am I going to have to sell it for, you know, in order to achieve that sort of required rate of return of 7%. So they're going to have to basically double their money if they hold it for that period of time. Now, there's a reason why that I want to sort of single this out for a second. how many times have you heard people talk about, especially when it comes to real estate, that, yeah, you know, I bought this piece of land back in 1960 and I paid, you know, $2,000 for it, and then I was able to sell it this past year for $10,000, you know, and you're saying to yourself, well, and of course they're making a big deal out of it, bought it for $2,000, sold it for 10. Well, yeah, they obviously got 5 times what they, you know, had bought it for. But how great of a rate of return really was that? You know, that's, you know, because invariably, you know, you think, you know, they think in their minds, well, I got 5 times what I, you know, bought it for. But if I had to hold it from 1960 until now, which is what? 57 years? Let's do the math. This is where the practical application of this, you know, begins to come into play. All right? So we said basically 1 payment per year, and we said that they bought it for $2,000. That's out of pocket. They sold it for $10,000, 5 times what they bought it for, but they had to hold it for 57 years. What was their rate of return? Solve for the interest rate. Yeah. A whopping 2.86% on an annualized basis. That's a pretty crap return, okay? But yet, most people, once again, in their minds, you know, what do most people do? They ignore the time factor. This is the lesson I'm trying to get home to you. The time factor is so mission critical and important. How long you hold a property matters. For example, you're a developer. You bought a property. Once you buy that property, what are you going to have to start doing? Probably paying debt service on the loan. But yet, what if the property is not ready to build on yet? What if you've got to go through the entitlements process? How many years possibly could it take to go through the entitlements process? A couple of years? Maybe 4 or 5 years, depending on how complex the project is. So that whole time from when you bought the property until whenever it's ready to start construction, maybe is 3, 4, 5 years. Okay, how long is it going to take you to do the construction? Maybe 18 months, 2 years? How long is it going to take you to get it fully occupied? You know, so you may be talking about, you know, a holding period of 5, 6, 7 years before you start generating the income off of that property to make it really, you know, be of some value to you. And so the whole thing of the holding period is so mission critical because many people ignore that. They just simply, you know, don't really ever take into account that literally the time is money. You know, the whole thing of how long we hold this. So let's just do this. Okay, that was a 57-year hold. But what if we just sort of modify that and we cut it down to, I don't know, 10 years. So 10, shift in, resolve for the rate of return. Well, at least that gets us into the level of respectability at a 17% return, okay? Just based on a 10-year hold, okay? Get it down to a 5-year hold. Whew. Now, 37.9% annualized rate of return. That's awesome. Now, cut it down to a year. We bought it at the beginning of the year, we sold it at the end of the year. $400% rate of return, okay? Because we're basically selling it for bought it for 2,000, selling it for 10,000, okay? But over a year, that's a 400% rate of return. Over a 57-year, that's 2.86. So my point is, the shorter the time you hold something, the better. Okay, let me throw, and I'm going to come to your question in just a second. So I'm going to finish the thought on this. I had a former student many years ago. This is probably 1994. And he bought and sold used cars. And he used credit cards basically as the way to finance the purchases. So he would go to you and say, okay, look, I'll give you $5,000 cash for your car. Okay, you were happy with that, fine, you took the $5,000, but he got the $5,000 by doing like a cash advance on his credit card. Well, cash advance, let's say on the credit card, was on an annual basis was 25%. Okay, interest rate. But he took and he sold the car a month later. He bought it from you for $5,000, sold it 1 month later for, let's say, $6,000, cash money. Does that make sense from an investment perspective or not? Yeah. Let's think about this.
20% returns.
He's making a payment of 2% a month approximately, so, I don't know, maybe it's more than that.
So look, 5,000 turned into basically 6,000. Okay, so let's just do the calculator math here for a second.
It's 20% off.
So if we did this, assuming it was a year holding period, we would do 5,000. Oops.
You said 1 month.
No, I know. Give me a moment. There's a method to my madness here. Trust me.
We're already confused, so you're just confusing us more.
Okay. So 5,000 was what he paid. 6,000 was what he sold it for. And in this case, let's assume that it was over the course of a year. No, it doesn't, but we're coming back to that. Okay. So what would his rate of return over the course of a year be?
$20.
Okay.
I said that before we did the whole school.
%. Okay? So, if he had held it for a full year, he would have basically only gotten a 20% rate of return. But his cost of borrowing was what? 25. So, under that circumstance, it doesn't make any sense at all for him to do that sort of a transaction if he had to hold it for a full year to do it. But what he was doing was 12 payments per year for 1 month. And actually, you're just going to do one in because you only want 1 month. This is where it matters. So his monthly return is really 240%. Think about this. Here's the way to think about it. If he could do this every single month, over and over and over and over again, replicate it 12 times a year, how much money would he earn at the end of the year? $12,000, yes? He's getting $1,000 on each transaction, $12,000 a year off of every single one of those. Now, granted, he's got to pay a little bit of interest, obviously, on the credit card, but nonetheless, it's still lower, much lower than basically how much he's earning on the asset. My point with this is all about holding period cost, okay? That I've heard story after story of like movie makers, independent movie makers, finance the whole movie using credit cards, and then ultimately, putting it out there to market as quickly as they possibly can. And part of the idea is they can get it to market. The quicker they can get it to market, the quicker then obviously they can start generating a return. And it actually makes sense to do it. Okay. My point being is short-term borrowing at high interest rates is not necessarily a bad thing. It totally depends on what your holding period is and what the likelihood is that you're going to be able to sell whatever asset it is. Same sort of thing, I mean, on a very, on a real estate basis, flipping houses. It's the same concept. The longer you have to wait to flip that house, your return is going to be going down. If you can get in there, buy the house, close the house, refinish the house, and within a 2-month turnaround time, you're probably going to do fine. But if it takes you 6 months, 8 months, 9 months to do that, maybe not so much. So the lesson is just holding period matters. Okay? All right, moving forward. All right, so let's take a look at A37.
Got how many years?
A37. Okay, first question. How many periods per year? Question A37. 1. Okay. Not a whole lot of information this question gives us.
Yeah, that's how it.
So basically, the one piece that we know with certainty is, okay, it's an 8-year term. And we know that we're looking for what is our rate of return, so we're going to be solving for the interest rate. But the other 2 pieces of information that we need, it just simply says, well, if you double the value of an investment in 8 years, what is the annual rate of return that you get? Okay, this is another important lesson. In some cases, the numbers don't matter. It's the relationship between the numbers that matters. Okay, and that's what this problem is trying to illustrate. Whether you're talking about $1, or you're talking about $10, or $1 million, the answer is going to be the same. Okay? So pick a number, any number.
100.
100. Okay. So if you bought okay, if you bought it for $100, what does that mean you have to sell it for? $200. It's going to be your future value. Do I follow that? Now you could have easily put, as I said, the number doesn't matter, it's the relationship between the number. So we could have put, let's say, 500 and 1,000. We could have put 1,000,000 and 2,000,000. But any combination, you're sure going to get the same answer because it's a relationship between the numbers. What amount, in other words, for it to double, what is going to be the rate of return? Okay, so let's just see what we get. Okay, at 9.05%. And if you want to double check the other ones, you'll find basically you get the same answer. Okay? So real simply put, you've got an investment that you want to make, and you want to double that investment over an 8-year period. How much would you have to invest it at? You'd have to invest it at a 9% rate of return, 9.05% rate of return or higher. Okay? Make sense? Okay? Moving forward.
So for the answer for the question, if you just put it.
9%.
Yeah, 9% your answer. Because the numbers that you use for the present value and future value in this case are irrelevant. It's just the relationship. Whatever number that you put in as present value, the number for future value has to be twice as much. Okay? All right. Let's see. Okay, let's do a simple one. A38.
Because you want to do it.
Okay. How many periods per year? One.
You could put 1,000, 2,000.
Okay. Clear all? All right. In this case, we've got a mortgage for $100,000. And the payment is going to be for 30 years. 9%. And what will the payment be if it's made at the end of the first year? So we're simply solving for payment.
The shift CIL is like a checkpoint.
I'm sorry?
The second step is like a checkpoint always.
Yeah.
That's
Does it have
once
it?
you start to get comfortable with it, I usually start to leave that step out because it really, that's all it is a checkpoint. But it also does one other thing. The shift clear all clears out the memory registers for the previous problem. Clear key by itself only clears out what is on the display.
So if I have the iPad, I will show
Yep.
the other exercise that we
In other words, on the calculator, you've got the clear key. But underneath the clear key, it says CLO. Whenever you hit the shift key and then you hit the clear, it accesses the clear all function, which simply clears out everything in the calculator. Whereas if you just hit the C key by itself without the shift, it only clears out what is currently in the display.
For example, if I do an exercise and I did a step wrong, can I go directly to that step, clear it, and change it? No.
No.
To do it over again?
All over. But if like you typed in a wrong number before you punch something in, then you can just hit the clear key and it will.
Yes, sir. Why do you do that? Step 2 and step 3?
I do it that way because that just ensures me that it is set for the proper number of compounding periods. I mean, you could do it the other way around, but then in one sense you have to do it again to see that it's reset itself to the right number of compounding periods. Okay? Okay, so what do we get here? $97.33, yeah, 64 rand. Okay? Everybody good? All right. So now here's the thing that you should be starting to do. You should start picking up, okay, I see this, okay, that makes sense. All right, now I know what I need to do now. Oh, I forgot to do that last time, do it this time. That's the sort of stuff that you should be thinking about. You know, if you're not following along and you're not trying to do these while we're doing them, you're gonna have a real problem because you've got to be able to do these quickly, okay? You know, every single one of these you should be doing in well under a minute, you know, and so some of you are taking way too long to put the information in, all right? So you need to start picking up the pace, you know, and start trying to identify the information as quickly as possible, throw it up here, punch it in, and move on, okay? All right. Okay, let's pick another one. We'll kind of go back in here for a second. Yeah, here's one that'll be a little bit different for you. All right, A3. A3.
I would do this yearly.
Okay? First of all, what is it?
15,000 payment.
Annual. All right, so let's start with what we've got. Has a projected net income of $15,000 a year. So that is going to be what? No.
Payment?
Payment. Okay? And its projected net sales price after 5 years, so we're going to put the 5 as our term. After 5 years, it's $150,000. So that's going to be what?
Future value.
Future value. Okay? Considering the risk, you require a 14% annual return.
I keep looking at the wrong project.
How much would you be willing to pay for it? That's going to be your present value. Okay? All right. So let's do it real quick.
Did you make your payment negative?
No.
Future value, net income, that's what you see. That's right. 50,000 is future value. Yeah.
129,401.51.
I do have.
Okay? Comfortable with that? So now let's take a look at this for just for a second.
5 years.
I'm going to do another one of these timelines just to kind of illustrate what's going on.
That's where I got it.
All right, so we're going to get 150,000 here at the end of year 5. Yes? We're also going to get $15,000 a year for each year. Yes?
There we go.
Okay, and we're going to be getting a 14% return. So what we're solving for is how much is all of this worth to us today? And that's where we get the 129, 401, 51. Okay. Now let's just yet again, kind of like we've done previously. Let's do the simple math. $15,000 a year for 5 years is going to be what? 75,000? 15,000 times 5 years, $75,000. Okay, $75,000 of operating income, if you will, with and I'm throwing that term out there because it's something we're going to be talking about. There's a difference between operating income versus residual income, okay, or reversion value. The reversion value is what? 150,000. So we have $15,000 a year of operating income, $150,000 of reversionary income. So 75,000 plus the 150,000 is going to be what? 225,000 total?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so cash money, we are getting a total of $225,000 over 5 years. We're paying less than almost half of that, obviously, 129,000 up front in order to get that, because we're getting a 14% rate of return on our investment. Does that make sense? Okay. We good?
Question.
Okay.
If you knew the facts, the 5 years, so you know how much cash you receive and you knew the interest rate,
Yep.
how would you back in? Could you back into that? Is that possible or no?
Could you back into which number?
Well, so if I know, hey, look, my internal rate is going to be the 14%,
Mhm.
right? And I know at the end of everything, I'm going to have $225,000. Would I be able to? How would I factor it back into the? Sometimes questions are brought to you many different ways. So if I know what my total cash out, and I know what my interest rate and my hold is, how do you back into the present value, I guess, at that point?
Well, okay,
That's what I'm sitting here trying to figure out.
there's several different ways to look at this. Okay, first of all, this 15,000 is not the same as this 15,000.
Right.
Because you're receiving this 15,000 a year from now, you're having to wait basically 5 years to receive this 15,000. So this number obviously is going to be discounted substantially less than what this one will be.
Right, right.
And so the timing matters, okay? But what we can do, you know, and I thought this is where you're sort of going with it, is that we could say, all right, let's change this number and solve for basically what would the return be. For example, if we just sort of went up here just for a second and we were to put in 0 as the interest rate and were to solve for present value without doing it on your calculator, what would the answer be?
225, right?
225,000. Okay? Because that's just simply cash in, cash out. Okay? But now if all of a sudden we want to change that, you know, to some sort of a predetermined rate of return, for example, that we want to say, as an investor, I automatically have a set sort of required rate of return or hurdle rate of, let's say, 10%, then I could simply put in 10% as the interest rate, resolve for present value, and I get like 150,000. Okay, make sense? All right, moving forward. All right. Actually, I'll just take some requests. Okay, pick one.
Six,
Okay.
Good one.
that's A and B.
All right, A6. Okay, pays for 10,000 for a mortgage contract. It'll pay 3,000 at the end of each of the next 5 years. What will the rate of return be? And suppose it's an annuity pay as an annuity due. Okay, good. This introduces to the annuity due concept, or basically something that happens at the beginning of the period. All right. So in this case, this is annual. So 1 payment per year. Clear everything out. All right, $10,000, and they're paying for this up front. Oops. As present value. The contract is going to pay him $3,000 as a payment for 5 years. So the question is, what is going to be his rate of return? Okay, so let's start with that. All right? Okay, 15.24%. Now, looking at this for just a second, we kind of, once again, kind of map it out here, just to sort of illustrate what's going on, because this one, it's going to matter here in just a second. All right, he's paying $10,000 here. He's getting back $3,000. And it ends up being a 15.24% rate of return. Okay, that makes sense, yes? Okay, everybody's cool and kosher with that. All right, now part B. Suppose that the annuity, now what does the word annuity mean? Annuity is basically just another word for a fixed payment, okay? Suppose that the annuity is paid as an annuity due. Okay? What is return? Okay? A payment due or an annuity due makes the payment received at the beginning of the period. Remember how we were talking about this earlier, and I said file away in the back recesses of your mind this whole business of how sometimes payments are made at the beginning of the period versus end of the period. Okay? And I said probably 90% of the time, you know, basically everything's going to be end of the period, but then there's going to be that 10% that are going to be made at the beginning of the period. This is one of those cases. Okay? So here is what is actually taking place. And I'll show you how to do it on the calculator, but first I want you to conceptually understand what's taking place. An annuity due, the term annuity due, just simply says you're shifting all of the payments made or received forward or backward, depending on your perspective. In this case, our first payment occurs here at time period 0. This one now goes there. So everything gets shifted back one full year or one full period. Does that make sense? So it goes from basically the payment being made or received here at the end of the year to now being made or received at the beginning of the year. Well, that also means, if you sort of think about it all the way through, instead of your final payment occurring here at the end of year 5, it's really being paid at the end of year 4 or really beginning of year 5 is a way to look at it. Okay, does that make sense? Yes or no? Okay.
It's like pushing it forward.
Yeah. So now, having said all of that, how do we do it on the calculator? Okay. Well, believe it or not, there's a function for this. Okay. The begin-end function. All right. This particular function is probably where most people get screwed up the most
Oh, yeah,
because they forget to reset it. Okay? So if you want to like put something in your margins and your asterisk, you know, in the margins, don't forget to reset the begin-end mode after changing it. Okay? So, what does it look like? Well, if we set the problem up, it's going to look almost identical, except for one line. Now, you don't actually have to redo it. I'm doing this on purpose just to show you side by side.
On the mark.
Okay, now where is the begin-end key? Okay, on the far right-hand side of your calculator, second row, you see a key that is marked MAR, margin. Okay, you're not accessing the margin key, you're accessing what is below it, which is the begin-end function. Now, the moment that you hit Shift Begin-End in your display, underneath your number, it is going to say BEG.
Doesn't seem right. It doesn't seem right.
Doesn't say it?
No. I got the answer, but the answer doesn't reconcile with my
Okay,
brain.
well, I'll get to that in a second. Okay. So, once again, once you've done this,
It's the same process. Just add the
same exact process. Everything's the same except for the beginning. And as a matter of fact, you don't even have to go through the whole problem again. You can just simply do this. You can just simply do Shift,
oh.
Begin, End, and then just simply resolve for the interest rate. Anyway, the answer that you get is 25.68%. Okay? It's an extra 10%. Well, the reason you're getting an extra 10% is, if you think about it, for the money that you're investing, you're getting your money a full year quicker. Okay?
But you're not getting as much interest because interest is paid in arrears. So that's why I'm having trouble understanding
Yeah,
why.
so it's just simply that you're getting your money quicker, and because you're getting it quicker, you're not discounting it as much in the future.
Yeah, but he said previously that time is money, so that's
Yeah.
why it's-
Yeah, maybe I can do it.
Okay? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Now, you can begin to hopefully see little nuggets here of situations of how returns could begin to be inflated, conflated in some way that, you know, you have somebody giving you a return based on the payments being made at the end of the period or end of the year versus those being made at the beginning. That can change everything. Now, which one's more accurate? Well, once again, totally depends on how you're basically recognizing that income. And this is not the real estate accounting class, and San Miguel is not here to give us the finer points of this, but the issue, as I mentioned earlier, is it basically boils down to that under most circumstances, we don't want to recognize this income until the end of the year. Even though payments may have been made at the beginning of the year, we don't usually want to recognize the income until the end because it's more conservative. It also allows you the chance to subtract out any operating expenses, any income tax, any other sort of depreciation, whatever else, and so then you recognize the income at the end of the year, even though it may hit your bank account at the beginning of the year or beginning of the month. So it's and once again, as a general rule, accountants tend to be more conservative whenever it comes to recognizing income. Okay, does that make sense?
Gap principle is you're earning income in the period. So if you're doing monthly, then you would divide it by 12. If it's annual, you do it. So for that, it doesn't matter.
So, okay.
Appreciate it.
Are we good? All right,
Excuse me,
let's pick another one.
the 40.
There's somebody pick another one. Go for it.
Do you recognize like the season of the year where there's a more tendency for natural disasters in order to make a decision to like correlating this with the future outcomes of natural disasters? For example, the high season for hurricanes is on August.
Right.
So if you get this return before that period, you have to caution because
Are you saying like seasonally adjusted?
yeah.
Yeah, you could. I mean, well, and this, probably the way in which the most common that we tend to seasonally adjust things are for like retail properties, because if retail properties have percentage rents above and beyond their base rents, then, the bulk majority of their sales tend to be obviously toward the holiday season.
Yeah.
And so they're gonna have a massive amount of rent that they're gonna pay in the percentage rent toward the end of the fourth quarter versus what sort of rents that they may generate any other time of the year. So yeah, you need to seasonally adjust it. Okay. Other ones of these you want to work through? You're taking suggestions or taking requests? Let me put it this way. Your homework assignment is going to be able to work through whichever ones we don't work through in class. Okay, so,
All right, just go right down the list then.
okay, which one?
16?
16? Okay. All right.
Last exercise. Six.
All right, this is annual, so one payment per year. Right. And we're doing a deposit of $5,000, which is going to say is a present value. And interest rate is 8%. And the first question, part A, how much will we have in the account at the end of 5 years? So 5 shift in, solve for future value. Okay? Now, one thing, just out of curiosity, look at your calculator. How many of you still have the word or still have begin in your display? Okay, you get rid of that. Hit shift begin end. Okay? Okay, so 5,000, present value, 8%, 5 years, 73.46, 64. Okay? That's part A. Part B. Assuming that the account earns 8% compounded quarterly, how much will it have in the account at the end of 5 years? Okay. So, how do we do quarterly?
I was just gonna say 8 divided by 4. Just make it 2%.
Shift payments per year. Quarterly is 4 times a year, okay? All right, so in this case, and we could just tack it on down there at the bottom, but just to sort of separate it out, I'm just gonna do it all over again. Everything else remains the same. Calculator adjusts for everything. So let's see what we get there. $55, $20, $40. Double check. Oops, nope, go back. $74, $29, $74. Okay, so in this particular case, we're getting a little bit more interest, and the reason we're getting a little bit more interest is because of the compounding effect of having the interest calculated or compounded 4 times a year instead of once. So, in essence, what is happening over the course of a year? Let's just sort of look at this. So this is 1 year, but over that 1 year, we have, let's say, first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, and fourth quarter. Okay, I'm only doing it for 1 year just to sort of just illustrate the concept. So what's happening is under the first scenario up here, we're only getting 8% interest calculated 1 time over the course of the year. So it gets applied as 8% here. But with the quarterly, what happens is we're getting basically 1/4 of that, or basically like 2% each quarter. But what's happening is now the interest that you earned here is earning interest on top of interest here, which is earning on top of the interest here, which is earning on top of the interest here. So you're going to get just a little bit more in terms of interest accumulation because it is being compounded 4 times a year. What that means is while you're, and this is going to come into effect or come into play this afternoon in the financial modeling class for those of you that are in there, is you're going to have a nominal interest rate or the stated interest rate of 8%, but your effective rate of interest because of the compounding will be something higher than that, okay? It may, you know, in this particular case, we can figure it out precisely, but the general idea is you're saying you're getting about not quite $100 more in interest just simply because it's been compounded 4 times a year, okay? Does that make sense, at least conceptually? All right. Part C. In comparing A and B, how much additional interest do you earn? Okay, so they ask you to go ahead and do the math. So 74, 29, 74, 73, 46, 64. $83.10. okay? And then, what are, actually you do it, okay. What are the effective annual yields for each investment, okay? Well, let me just tell you, excuse me. Key rule, for annual compounding, the stated rate is same as the effective rate. Once again, for annual compounding, the stated rate of interest is the same as the effective rate of interest, because there's no difference, okay? For anything other than annual compounding, your effective rate of interest is going to be higher, okay? And now let me show you how to do it on the calculator.
Can you repeat the statement?
Okay.
All right.
Well, it'll become intuitively obvious here in a second, okay? All right. So let's do this. On our calculators, let's set the calculator to 1 payment per year and put in 8%, and then you're going to hit shift nom %, which is right underneath the interest rate key. Then you're going to hit shift effective %, which is right next to it underneath the present value key. And what you should get is 8%, because as I said, whenever it's annual compounding, the stated rate or the nominal rate is going to be the same as the effective rate, okay? Now, if we change this up, in this particular problem, was 4 compounding periods per year, or quarterly compounding. You're simply going to put the same thing in, 8% as our nominal percent, or our stated interest rate, and then you're going to solve for the effective %, and you're going to get something higher than 8%. We put it in. It's going to be 8.243 whatever %. And so that extra little bit of interest is simply due to the compounding effect of the quarterly compounding. Now, if it were monthly compounding, 12 payments per year. Same thing.
That would be a lot more.
Not a lot more, because it kind of,
Well, yeah, it's just like 25% every 4. So it would be like.
So let's see.
8 seconds.
doesn't go up that much, it goes up to 8.299-ish, okay? All right, or monthly compound, all right? Okay, next problem.
Number 18?
Number 18. Okay, this is annually. All right. 30,000 is going to be our future value. 8 years is going to be our term. 10% is going to be our interest rate. And they're asking you, basically, should he buy it at the price of 15,000?
No.
But before we do that, what we're going to do is we're going to see what should he buy it at, which is the present value. Okay? $13,995.22. Okay, so that price represents the most he should pay for it. in order to achieve his 10% return with an 8-year holding period. Okay, so the question asks, should he buy the lot at an asking price of $15,000? That's a yes or no question. Yes or no? Should he buy it at $15,000?
Yeah.
Okay, are you paying attention to what I just said? Okay. 13,995.22 represents the absolute most he should be willing to pay for the lot.
If he's seeking 30,000.
If he is seeking a 10% rate of return for 8 years. So if the asking price is $15,000, that's at least $1,000 more than he should pay for it. So therefore, he should not buy it at $15,000. Does that make sense? Okay. Part B. What is the effective yield of the investment if Mike does purchase the land for $15,000 and sells it 8 years later for the $30,000? Now, without doing the calculator, if he pays more than this, what's that going to do to his rate of return?
Lower.
It's going to lower it. So it's going to be something less than 10%. Yes? Okay, so let's just see. So all we've got to do is put in the $15,000 as a negative present value, and then simply solve for the interest rate. 9.05%. Okay? So if he did go forward, as many of you had suggested, and pay $15,000 for it, then he'd only be getting a 9.05% rate of return instead of the 10% that he wants. Okay? Make sense? Okay?
Did you get to 13.99?
Okay? Give me another
You
one.
at that point, they just changed it to 15,000 plus
11?
11?
Because I had something.
Okay.
So, yeah, one penny there, yeah, one penny there, another 30,000 future value. 8 payment, penny here, 10%.
Okay. So in this case,
And then,
we've got 20 rentable units, and he's going to need to replace the air conditioning in each of those units 10 years from now at a cost of $5,000 per unit. So we can either, once again, this is one of those that we can do on a per unit basis, or we can do it overall, okay? So if we do it on a per unit basis, we're simply going to be, and this is, let me see here, monthly. All right, he needs to accumulate $5,000 as future value 10 years from now. And the money is going to be earning 6%. All right. And basically what we're searching for is what? No. Payment. Because he's looking for what is a monthly amount that he needs to set aside to basically, out of each month's rent, to basically pay for these air conditioning units, okay? So, let's do the math, or do the calculator. So $30.51 per month per unit. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. What's the next one you want?
20.
Okay. you plan to deposit $4,000 at the end of each 6-month period, okay, for the next 10 years, okay? So every 6 months is how many times a year?
2.
2. So 2 payments per year, okay? And the deposit is $4,000. That's a payment. 10 years. And 6% interest. What is the balance at the end of 10 years? So that's going to be future value. Okay. Yep. 107,481, 49.50 rounded. Okay. So does everybody understand what's going on there? So every 6 months, he deposits $4,000 over a 10-year period. So basically, he's depositing $8,000 a year for 10 years, which is going to be $80,000 of hard cash money. That $80,000, because of all the compounding of interest, will ultimately be worth $107,481 at the end of that 10-year period. Okay? You good with that? Okay, now that's the second part of that problem, I believe. If the deposits are structured as an annuity due, what is the balance at the end of 10 years? Okay, so what do we have to do here?
Beginning.
Shift begin end mode, resolve for the future value.
110.
I like that function.
Okay. Now, the way to think about this is the reason you're getting an extra $3,000 is because you're in essence depositing that first $4,000 a full 6 months earlier. So you're earning more interest over time. All right? Now, just to be safe, let's go ahead and get the shift begin end to get rid of that out of your display so you don't carry it forward into a future problem. Okay? All right, we good? Making progress? All right. All right, what next one do you want to do?
28.
28. All right, this one, you buy a building for $1 million, you sell it for $1.5 million at the end of 5 years. And then it's asking you what equal annual end of the year cash flows would you also have to have from the investment in order to make a 12% annual rate of return. This is kind of a cool little problem, all right? So let's sort of take it, and once again, this is, yeah, these are annual. All right, so we start off with $1 million is what we bought it for, so that's going to be the negative present value. $1,500,000 is what we're going to sell it for, which is future value. And this is over 5 years. And we want to make a 12% return. And so we're going to solve for payment. Okay.
41,000.
I'll see you in the quick one.
Yep. $41,295.13.
That's the hard part.
So the way to think about that,
Oh, okay.
this probably, I mean, it's a simplified version, but the way to think about this is, you know, if you bought this thing for $1 million, you're selling it for $1.5 million, you know that's what you're gonna do to sell it for over a 5-year period, and your rate of return is 12%. You're saying, okay, over the course of the year, yeah, you gotta generate that, divide that by 12 and say, okay, there's what the monthly rent that I need to charge my tenants, you know, sort of thing. I mean, so there's some real value to, you know, once again, kind of beginning to think about, once again, the logic pieces of why these are sort of important. Okay, moving forward, another one.
So it should end, okay.
Next request.
Okay.
32.
32.
This one is making this one. It's actually not easy, exactly.
What is
USFP.
I put it for
Okay. The reason I have this one circled,
832?
A32. This one is one of those, the wording is a little confusing, okay? Basically within that first line. Okay, your property owner, who leases a property annually beginning at the end of the first year. Okay, so what's happening? Are you getting payments or making payments at the beginning of the year? Or are they happening at the end of the year? You take each of the lease payments and you invest them in a bank that earns 8% annually. How much money will you have in your bank account at the end of the 10th year? Okay, so first of all, you are the property owner. Okay, let's put that in perspective. You are the property owner, so you're going to be receiving those lease payments, so it's cash inflow to you. And this is annual, so it's a sort of, let's start with what we know. All right, 50,000, what is that going to be?
Payment.
Payment. And it's going to be a positive payment because we're receiving it. Okay? And for 10 years, and we are going to invest them at 8%, and we are basically solving for future value. Now, this is the part where, depending on one's interpretation, we could say, are we receiving these payments at the beginning of the year? Are we receiving them at the end of the year? Otherwise, it's a simple problem, okay? And so let's go ahead and solve it as is, okay? Okay? Everybody get that? Yes or no? Okay. Now,
I got 713 from.
well, hold on. If we make the assumption that we're getting the payments at the beginning of the year and investing them, then we would actually end up with $782,274.37. So this assumes end of year, whereas this answer assumes beginning of year. Okay, does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. All right, next one. And once again, go ahead and make sure you shift it back to,
Number 8.
okay? Number 8. Dr. John. Okay, 50 acres of land, $800 per acre. Okay. This is annual.
Right? Just to make sure, yeah, right, 50,000. And where to shift. And this.
How many years was it? Sorry, 10 years and 10 years. Okay, so if he bought it for $800 an acre, assuming an 8% interest rate over 10 years, that means the value today, start with that, and then we'll answer specifically what they asked. Would be 17, 27, 14 an acre. Okay, now, the question asked, what price must he receive today to break even with his opportunity rate? Okay, so that's the 17.27 an acre. Everybody cool with that? Yes?
Yep.
All right. Part B is if Dr. John sold the land for $1,400 today, what would be his actual rate of return? Okay, so there, we just simply replace, put in $1,400 as the future value, and then solve for the interest rate. And you would end up with 5.76%. Okay? All right. What's the next one?
You already did 6, right?
You still got a good hour, almost. 54 minutes.
24?
Day 24. Okay, so another little apartment complex. All right. And this is annual on the first part. Okay, and 50,000 is going to be our future value. 10 years from now. 8% is going to be an interest rate. How much do we need to deposit each year? That's going to be a payment. Okay, that's for part A. And then part B is you're going to change it to twice a year.
T4.
Okay, so let's see what we get. $34, $51, $47 with annual compounded or annual deposits. Or 16, 79, 08, 09, twice per year. Okay? Is the logic beginning to take hold? Little by little? Okay, good. All right. Moving on. What's the next one you want to do?
Number 2.
Okay. Okay, so the first piece is annual. So 10,000 is going to be an investment that he makes. And it's going to be for 1 year. And it's 8%. And we're going to know, okay. So first of all, we'll go ahead and solve and get the future value. Okay, 10,800 is what is actually going to be in there at the end of the year. But what they're asking for is what must the nominal interest rates be on the second and third options to make all the investments earn the same yield. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at the second and third option. So the second one is quarterly. And everything else is basically the same, except the answer is going to be different. And then the third option, monthly. All right, so what we're seeing here is, once again, kind of the effect of the compounding interest rate. And so you see in the first instance that the amount of interest being generated off of $10,000 is basically $800. With quarterly compounding, you're getting $824.32 worth of interest. And then with monthly compounding, you're getting $829.99. Now, but what the question is asking is, what must the nominal or the stated interest rates be on the second and third options to make all of the investments earn the same yield? So what they're actually saying is, if we want all of them to have the same yield, or in other words, earn 10,800, what would the effective rate have to be on this, and what would it have to be on that? So the way we can do that, very simply, is we can put in the 10,800 under this one as the future value, and then solve for the interest rate. Do the same thing over here. 10,800 and solve for the interest rate. Now, assuming you still have it like set up for monthly compounding, you end up here 7.72%. Okay? So what they're saying is the equivalent of an 8% annual rate is the same as a 7.72% quarter or monthly rate.
Sorry, I didn't get how you got, like, how'd you get that 7.72?
All I did was simply
Divide it?
No, I simply replaced the 10,829.99 with
Okay.
10,800 as your future value, and then solve for the interest rate.
And then when I press it, I get 8.
Well, that's because you still have it in as 1 payment per year.
Ah, okay.
And then for the one that's 4 payments per year, let's do that one real quick.
So if I do 12 plus 10.
7.77.
10,800 future value. And it says error. Well, do something. So if I do
So you should get 7.77. Okay? And if you're getting an error message, it's because you put both numbers in as positives.
I put both numbers as what?
Somebody said they got an error message.
Yeah, I did.
And if you have an error message, the reason you have an error message is you probably put the 10,000 present value as a positive number, not a negative number. Okay? Because it's basically, there's no solution whenever you do that.
So
Okay, all right? What's the next one you want to do? Okay? No other suggestions?
31?
31.
And now you do it.
12 is correct. So then you do now 12, right? So I did this.
Okay,
12, right?
so
And I do 10,000.
this lease, let's take a look at this. All right. Requires you to pay, excuse me, $40,000 at the end of the first year, and then it escalates by 4% a year for the remaining 4 years. Okay. So one of the most common things with a lot of commercial leases is you have what are called escalation clauses. And this is just simply a way for the owner of the property to ensure that, you know, the revenue being generated off the property is commensurate with any sort of, you know, growth rate of the economy, and you know, giving them obviously a little bit of extra money each year. So in this particular instance,